So happy to have you here too. You're also a student at AUBG.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to give the and thank you for the Truth Post Society for organizing this. And okay, I'm going to give you the guys the floor, and things will be informal enough so we can have discussion. And feel free to ask any questions.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Zagoslav, the floor is yours.
all right, thanks. So I'll just be showing you the presentation, quickly, so that you can get an idea what the project actually is. And then we can have a discussion about it. And also, like Romba mentioned.
Jean, could be Jean.
Okay, so that's.
I can do the army, could my name.
So like Jean mentioned, we can provide data from the Bulgarian parliament for anyone who wants to do research with it. So with Jean, we've had some very interesting results. So yeah, that's something we can discuss today. First thing we need to talk about STRAZHA is what's the motivation behind the project. So the problem with Bulgaria right now is that there is a political crisis. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the situation. How many of you are familiar with the situation? Okay, so that's almost everyone. But anyway, the situation is that there hasn't been a stable government for 2 years, and we've had 4 elections for the National Assembly, and each time the turnout is falling, so fewer people want to engage with our political institutions, which is really bad, and we should probably do something about this. And I'm going to try and think about why that is. I think one of the biggest problems in Bulgaria, from my point of view, is the lack of trust, and the lack of trust in our institutions and in our political representatives. So in Bulgaria, many people don't trust that politicians will act on their behalf in their interest. They think that politicians are corrupt, self-interested, and I think that's, well, it's a reputation that is somewhat deserved, but it's something that we should do something about this. I think this is one of the fundamental problems in Bulgarian politics. So why is there no trust in Bulgaria? It's interesting that Bulgaria is a low trust society, which is very common for countries that have been through totalitarian socialism. And we see similar attitudes in other Eastern European countries. In Bulgaria, there have been decades of corruption, which have made the people distrust the entire political class. So many people believe the entire political class can't be trusted. Not a single person, not a single politician can be trusted. So corruption is a very complex topic, but one of the things that enables corruption is the lack of transparency. It's much easier for politicians to be corrupt when we don't have an easy way to find out what exactly they're doing, and we don't have a way to figure out if what they're doing is actually in our interest. If people knew what politicians are doing, and if politicians knew that they're being watched, then they would probably behave better. So transparency is something that is probably universally good everywhere. The more transparency there is, the better. The more we know about our public institutions and what we're doing, and the easier it is for people to figure out what their institutions are doing, then they can make more informed decisions when they go and vote. So this is something that's very important. So now one thing I want to look at is how easy it is for people to find out what their representatives are doing on the official website of the parliament. Because our project is basically a website. And it's a website that is sort of competing with the official government website because it aims to provide the same information in a better way. So this is the official government website, the official website of the National Assembly. As you can see, it's very difficult to navigate. There's many sub-menus, and it's really hard when a citizen opens the website and wants to know something in particular. It's very hard to get to the information if the citizen has no prior experience with the website. So there are 3 things that I think are very important. So first thing is, can a citizen find out who represents them? Can they find out how the representative voted? And can they see what the representative has said from the parliamentary tribune? And the answer is, well, hypothetically you could, but it's very difficult. And even if it's more difficult for foreigners, of course, because even if they do understand Bulgarian, even Bulgarians who understand Bulgarian, it's very difficult to find the information that you're looking for. So I just want to say, hypothetically, you could find out by clicking here. You can find out, you can see a list of all the representatives, but it's difficult to see who is representing you from your region and from your party that you voted for. You can find out their votes and their statements, and the parliamentary debates. There is a page with the transcripts for every parliamentary session. It's right here, and here you can find how they voted, but it's represented very unintuitively. So this is the website that we made. So this is the landing page. The first time you open it, you just see a representation of the seats in the parliament. Now this isn't a one-to-one representation because we don't really know where they sit. It aims to be sort of close. So something which is really common is that the chairman of the parliamentary groups, they sit in the front row, and the people who talk the most usually sit in the front rows. So the people who are the chairman of the parliamentary group, the vice chairman, the secretaries, they usually sit up here in the front. So that's something that's represented here. They're arranged in such a way which is sort of like how they sit in the actual parliament. Now this is something, by the way, this is something that I've been criticized about, is why have I done it in such a rectangular way instead of a sort of amphitheatrical representation, which is much more common. When you open online, when you open different parliaments, usually you see this sort of, like a semicircle, like an arch, like an amphitheater, basically. But Parliament in Bulgaria is arranged differently. The plenary hall is arranged differently. And I just wanted to be very close to how it actually is. And so that's why it's represented in such a way so it feels more natural. So when you open this, you can basically hover and see each one along with their face and their names. If you want to find out who specifically has been elected from your region, which, so Bulgaria has a proportional system, so it doesn't really matter who was elected from your region, but it should matter more because these people have been elected with the votes from the people in that region, or, like electoral district. And the citizens should have someone that they should hold accountable for their actions. When you have 240 representatives, and from each single party you could have, like, let's say 50 members, you don't know which one to hold accountable, even though all of them make decisions, all of them push the buttons in the plenary hall, so all of them bear some responsibility. But it's difficult for the citizens to know who exactly is responsible for them. And that's why I think this map can be useful. So when you hover, you can see who has been elected from each district, from each party. Even though it's a proportional system, you can find, let's say you have voted for one of these parties, and you can see, and you live in this district, let's say. So you can find one person, for example, if you voted for this party, you can say this person is accountable to me. And then you can contact them if you want to. So can I see how they voted? This is something that's been very difficult in Bulgaria. But it's also something that's been very interesting because this is the point where actually you see individual responsibility of representatives. This is the way it manifests in practice, is the way they vote. Because this is what basically changes the world, because statements are also important, but this is the part that actually makes a difference in our lives. And this is something that you should hold them accountable for. Now, something which is really interesting is that people in Bulgaria are used to parties who vote like a monolith, everyone votes the same. But in reality, when you visualize it this way, you can see that parties don't actually vote together all the time. you have people who dissent sometimes. So let's say in this party, which is STRAZHA, you have someone which has abstained. You have two people who have abstained, even though their party has voted for the motion. And that's really important because you can hold these people accountable. And you can hold everyone accountable, not the entire party where sort of individual responsibility gets lost in all the people, but you can find someone in particular who you can blame for the decision they have taken. And that, I hope that can make these representatives more than button pushers, because right now most of them really are just button pushers. They just, their job is to just follow the party leader and push the button that they've told them. But hopefully they can be more, they can have a mind of their own, hopefully. This is also very important. This is the parliamentary debate. You can see the statements they have made. So our project has 20 years of parliamentary statements, basically every plenary session in the last 20 years. We have made more accessible on our website, and they're presented in such a form which is more natural to people, more like social media, the way you see people arguing in comment sections or whatever. This is much better than the way you see it on the official website. And this is very important because you want to see what the position of this representative is right now and what has been in the past. And that's also important because there are some representatives who have been in parliament for many, many years, more than 20 years. There are some of them have been like parliamentary veterans, more than 25 years. And they've had statements about many different things. And you can find this with our, So when you find a statement which you think is really interesting, and that's one of the, I think, the most important things most important functionalities our platform provides. When you find some interesting statement, it might be shameful to the representative, or it might be really good. It might be a statement that you really like. The representative himself can find something that they really like and can share it as well. So these statements can all be shared. So they have like a unique number up here. And there's a short link that can be shared online, and then anyone can see the statement. Also, you can look at statements in the past. So this is one of the longest serving representatives. This means VAT, isn't the VAT tax. And you can see what they've said in 2005 about the VAT tax. So we have like a search bar on each representative's profile. And when you type in some word or some type of string or query, you can find all the statements they've made about. And here you can see about the VAT tax, for example, what they've said in the past. So this was actually useful to me recently, because one of our most prominent politicians, Ivan Kostov, which is, well, he's not a politician anymore, but he was prime minister from 1997 to 2001. So I wanted to see what he thought about the flat tax, and it turns out he was opposed to it, and there was no way I could find out this. I actually found it through our search functionality. And you can see that sort of thing to actually see how people have debated certain things which we now take for granted, because when let's say more than 15 years have passed and something, since some law has been enacted, and people forget that law might have been controversial at the time, but using this platform you can actually see the debate back then. So this platform has all possible that, because many Bulgarians actually don't believe it when they see it, because few of them know that actually all this data is freely available on the website on the official website of the parliament. The problem is that it's usually represented in a very hard to use way. So for example, this is the votes of different representatives. Now you can see that you basically have a big spreadsheet, and you have pluses, minuses, zeros, and equals. And you have here the number of the votes, but you don't really know what they voted on, and it's really hard to see it in the way that is represented on our website. It's hard to see, for example, people who have dissented, like I showed just now. It's just really difficult to look at. So this is the transcript. So this is the comment section that I showed you. This is how it is on the website of the parliament, on the official website. And it's basically, like a big conversation but it's difficult to, I mean, it's just when you look at it, it's really difficult to start reading it. It's really cumbersome, let's say. So, this is the STRAZHA philosophy, and you know, the basic motivation behind the website is that, so open data is very important to transparency. You know, data about our public institutions, which, you know, the EU makes us provide much more data than we provided in the past. So right now there are many arrays of data which are available online, but many of them are provided in such a way that it's really difficult for ordinary citizens to use them so that they can get something out of them. So they can get something out of the data. It's really difficult for ordinary citizens. Only like technical experts can parse the data and look through it and find things they're looking for. So open data should not just be there, it should not just be provided in raw form, it should be accessible and it should be beautiful. It should be engaging for the citizen. And for every single citizen, not just people who have technical skills like myself, but also citizens who are used to using social media on the internet and they don't know how to write code or scripts, but they're used to using social media. So if you represent it in such a form, it's more natural to people and they will probably engage more with the data. And they'll probably be more interested in their institutions as well. And so they'll be more transparent to people, which hopefully would make it easy for citizens to hold them accountable and in the long run increase trust in these institutions. So we've also done some different projects. For example, this is in the same spirit of making open data more accessible. This is this is a system called SEVRA. It's a system of tracking payments from the central budget, from the government budget, to different recipients, different companies, let's say, on public procurement contracts or something like that. And this big array of information was made public last summer, but it was just a big CSV file, which was very big, and even when you try to open it, your computer crashes. So again, it was really difficult for people who don't really know how to work with data. It was really difficult to actually use it for something useful. But we made it into a platform where you can see every single institution, every single recipient, and you can actually see what money has been paid out to different companies. So for example, here you can see particular payments with their amounts. You can see, for example, the account numbers. You can see the names of the companies. And if you see something out of the ordinary, you can probably investigate more yourself. So this is, for example, for investigative journalists, this is useful because they can find leads that they will investigate more. So this is how we try to popularize our project on social media. So we post statistics on Facebook. We post statistics about the parliament. For example, this is a statistic which shows how many words have been spoken by each parliamentary group in the 47th National Assembly. Now this is very important because STRAZHA, because of the data we have, is the only organization which can actually do this calculation, because no one else in Bulgaria can do this calculation, because no one else has this database. It's a database of statements, which actually, the thing you saw on the Parliament website is you just have big text. You don't really have them, the statements extracted and linked to the person who's saying them. So there's no way to actually calculate what each parliamentary group has been saying. You can only calculate, for example, how many words there are in the plenary session as a whole. But you know, with the database you've extracted, you can actually make these sorts of calculations. And this is how we try to promote our platform and make people want to engage with the data more, because we show them why the data can be interesting. So the foundation was created by me and Friedrich. So we're both very young, as you can see, and the organization itself is very young. So it's a new type of project that you don't see many like this in Bulgaria. This is our official logo. This is STRAZHA. I'll say later what STRAZHA means, for those who cannot know. This is one of the most important questions, because in Bulgaria, whenever you try to do something, usually you get a question, who's funding you? And it's a good question. I don't think it's wrong to ask this question. So, because who's funding you has a big effect on how much people can trust you, we decided to be crowdfunded. So we only accept small donations from only real people, so no from natural persons, so no companies or parties or any legal entity is not allowed to give us money. And we've actually returned donations in the past from legal entities because we have a strict policy. So only people and only small donations. So this is how successful we've been. So it's going okay. Right now we get thousands of visits every month on our website. It varies a lot. Usually each day we have about 100 or 200 unique users on our website. We also get donations, not like very big money, but at least 1,000 level we've been getting every month, which helps us, continue to work on this. We've also been on every national TV channel, and our Facebook posts have been very popular. So they've had a very big reach, some of them. So, considering Bulgaria is a very small nation, this is very, these are good results for us. And so this is, for people who don't know Bulgarian, STRAZHA means guard or watch. So most of these websites in other countries usually are called something watch, like you have voltwatch.eu, let's say. They usually have watch in the name. So STRAZHA is a way to translate watch in Bulgarian, but it's sort of a more interesting way. It's like STRAZHA means a guard, people who guard something. And that's basically the message of our platform, is that we the people should be the guardians of our democracy. And that's everything from me. Thank you. Right, so now we can have a discussion.
Yeah.
Questions?
I think that one of the data also interesting, and I think you shared that in the Facebook posting, it was how different political parties voted in parliament on different, and I think there was a very strong voting similarity between GERP, PPC, and RTUTH. It was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because you have parties that publicly play like they are in opposition and they are against one another.
Yeah, so I can talk about this a little bit. So what we did was we tried to find how many, how similar are voting patterns of different parties, how similar they are. So this means basically looking at different votes, and if the parties have either, so we have two outcomes, either they have supported the motion or they haven't supported the motion. So like abstaining and voting against, we count as the same thing. And so a party can either support it or not support it. And then we find out how many parties have voted the same way on that metric. And what we usually find is that obviously the opposition parties have higher similarity, even though these parties might be opposed ideologically or opposed on many different positions they still vote together because they're opposition, so they want to vote against the ruling coalition. And that's something we found out. Also, it's interesting in the previous parliaments, where you had the dominant player being GERB, you find that usually the division you see is not between the ruling coalition and the opposition, it's between GERB and everyone else. So usually GERB votes one way and everyone else votes against them. So even their partners in parliament, in the government, they also vote against them, which is really interesting because it's not expected. In the 47th National Assembly, you see that the ruling coalition votes have a very high percentage of similarity, and you see the opposition also. But with previous it was different.
With the exception of foreign policy, we saw that.
Yeah,
on
that's
foreign
true.
policy on Russia, because we a bit of things on this. On the vote on Russia, you have alternative majorities. So, for example, you have DPC, GEP. They have a very pro EU, pro NATO voting attitude. Not surprisingly, BCP was, the Bulgarian socialists were much more divided, even
Yeah.
though they were in the ruling coalition. The extreme right, not surprisingly, were voting against. But you had those interesting, it was quite interesting to see actually you had, for some issues, you have alternative majorities that are being,
Yeah, actually,
here.
the way you can look at it is that there are different axes which divide the Bulgarian political space. So one of the most important axes, of course, is the foreign policy one. You have parties which are pro-Western and parties which are pro-Russian. And you see this now with BSP and STRAZHA, and they're pro-Russian and everyone else is pro-Western. And basically these divisions are what's making it difficult for us to have a stable government, because there are many different intersecting divisions, and there isn't like one axis where everyone can agree on something and so they can form a government. And that's basically the problem we have, yeah.
And it's interesting because in political science, the question that a lot of people have been struggling with when it comes to Bulgarian politics is try to see which are the real dividing lines in a Bulgarian society. In other words, that may explain the way people vote.
Yeah.
I know that you have, and it's much more difficult because you have this concept of clientelism in Bulgarian politics. So, for example, you have DPC that tends to have very stable clientele of voting, because basically you can see
I have a comment about DPC. Because basically in the constitution it says that there should be no political party that is based on ethnic or religious beliefs. Do you think that DPC shouldn't be in parliament because they're basically targeting people from a certain minority group mostly? Or is it something, or am I not understanding it correctly?
I mean, the Constitutional Court has a ruling on this, so it's pretty much a decided issue. I mean, obviously, those people are part of Bulgaria, they're Bulgarian citizens, and they choose to be represented by DPC. Now, it's a separate issue why that is the case, but like whatever Professor Kromboas said is totally correct. It's just not Turkish people, it's a clientele of voting.
But you have clientele also for other parties, to be clear.
DPC
it's not the only party. Having some first-hand experience of recently of how politics works in Bulgaria, I can tell you that, Gerpen is also has
and not just GERB, even the parties that you wouldn't expect that from, they also engage in some questionable behavior.
Anyhow, the thing is, the idea is that we should try to identify those big dividing lines has been a bit difficult, because you have this kind of fuzzy, because Bulgarian politics is not really based a lot on ideology. That the thing is to be liberal, to be socialist in the Bulgarian context. Frankly speaking, even the way the political actors themselves articulate those things are not very clear. So, one dividing line, for example, which is pro-West, pro-EU, this kind of dividing line, and the other one is like pro-East. Pro-East and less pro-West.
I mean, you have that dividing line, but you cannot form a coalition around it. So my question to the student is, because we found something in our analysis of the last National Assembly, why do you think that the last coalition broke apart? What was the issue that drove them away from each other? Like there's no such people, like in Bulgarian, that's what we say. There is continued change.
Yeah. There is no such country.
Oh yeah.
No such nation.
So what was the issue that drove PP from...
Yeah, that's a very good question, because we actually have data on the subject, like actually empirical data on what drove them apart, and it's interesting to see what you think. Anyone want to try?
A hint, it is related to one of our professors.
Professor Gurov?
Yeah, it was
He's a professor here.
He used to be a thing.
Oh, right.
Not anymore.
Professor Andrei Gurov?
Is he still a professor?
Well, you gave it away.
You can't be. Yeah, exactly. You should have guessed it. Like most people would say foreign policy, right?
No,
North Macedonia, but that was not the issue.
No,
That,
Is it? Is it an issue? Is it an issue about the Ukrainian war or something?
No,
No.
It's not a foreign policy issue.
Actually, the main wedge was what had happened in the context of
yeah, the National Bank.
the failed nomination of the director.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll tell you about this. It's interesting that this came up when analyzing the patterns of Daran Pesky, his attendance pattern, let's say, because he is notorious for not attending most of the plenary sessions. So in the 47th National Assembly, he skipped 95% of them. So 95% of plenary session he did not attend. But what's interesting is, which ones did he attend? Which ones did he think were important for him? And what the data shows is that it's very selective. So one thing which was sort of understandable, he was in the first days when they were voting for the cabinet. So he was there to vote against it. Then he was, when there was a declaration against the invasion of Ukraine, he also attended then, which was sort of like, solidarity with their partners in the European Parliament. That's one explanation. And all of the other sessions he's attended, what they were voting for was the Bulgarian National Bank. And what's really interesting is that he actually came in for when they were voting the rules by which they were going to select a new governor for the Bulgarian National Bank. And then a month later, he came in when they were actually voting for the person, for his preferred candidate, Karimansky. And this actually showed that maybe, this is important to him. It's important for DPS, for like the inner circle of DPS. And what's really interesting is that when you actually analyze voting patterns between there is such a people and everyone else, there is such a people. When you actually analyze how their votes correlate with everyone else, you can actually see that the main dividing line between them and the coalition was actually votes that have Bulgarian National Bank in the name. So actually votes that have something to do with the Bulgarian National Bank are the ones where there is such people dissented. Even on ones connected to the, like the highways, the Agency for Public Infrastructure. Right, yeah, so even on votes that had to do with Agency of Public Infrastructure, in the beginning they had dissented there. There was like a conflict, a small conflict, but then they shook hands about this. But the one thing that they really couldn't get over was that Karimansky was not selected as the governor of the Bulgarian National Bank.
Now, I just want to clarify that that's what our data shows. That's not what
That's
there
not-
is
That's
such
not a political
people.
statements, yeah.
They didn't say that. Like Slavy Trifonov, when he retracted his support for the government, he said two things: North Macedonia and money. And like that's an issue that wasn't mentioned at all.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to think about why the Bulgarian National Bank is so important to them. And there are many things we can hypothesize.
That's speculation, though.
Yeah, we can speculate about this. The Bulgarian National Bank oversees Bulgarian banks. And, a very notorious case of bank failure was Corporate Trade Bank, right? So, we can probably guess that that's why it was important to Pesky, because, he was a beneficiary of that whole thing.
This is what the euro is interesting too, because
Yeah, what about the euro? Like, is it going to be? Is it going to come into action the next year, or is it? Or because we practically don't really have a government, is like what's the?
well, one of the arguments for the anti-euro zone. I mean, the thing is some people are against Bulgaria joining the euro. They're using all kind of arguments, but one of the non-set argument is that if Bulgaria joins the euro, then you have a much more strict banking supervision that is taking place, instead of having the complacent, Bulgaria, with all respect for the Bulgarian National Bank, but the thing is, people thought that actually, that I was saying that I don't have any figures, but suddenly that 1/3 of Bulgarian banks, 1/3 of banks in Bulgaria, they call themselves banks, but they're maybe not real banks, or at the very least their assets, because that's also something important, have origins that can be problematic. And the thing is, the threshold of transparency would be much higher if Bulgaria is part of the euro. So I think that it's part of the story, and this, of course, people are using opposition to the euro, saying we're not ready for the euro, we need to have better salaries and things like that. But these are small screen arguments used by some people.
Yeah, a lot of people actually use the argument that if we get into the eurozone, the salaries wouldn't match to the stat.
No, actually, that's a very interesting thing we can discuss about the euro. First thing, before that, does anyone want to ask something about the presentation? You know, okay, go ahead.
I want to ask a question about you guys. What are your
Okay.
aspirations for the next 5 years?
You mean with this project, or?
Rule the world.
Right, so one thing we want to, so there's a common misconception among people that the way that STRAZHA can go forward is to basically add more data, but that's not the direction we're actually looking at. What we want to do is make the platform more interactive, so users can, for example, leave their own opinions, let's say, which is, you know, it's very dangerous because there are many like trolls everywhere, like troll attacks. It's a very harsh environment. But you know, that is actually our biggest aspiration, is one day have the possibility of asking representatives questions through our platform, and that they will actually respond using our platform. And it's something which looks very difficult because most of what we've seen is that most of these politicians, they like to control their own informational flows. They don't like to have it somewhere else. So we don't really know if they will answer our questions or the questions that people have asked through our platform. It's more likely that they would question the legitimacy of our platform, which has been done many times before by many parties, even parties you wouldn't think would do it. So yeah, it's something that we want to do one day. It's looking very difficult though. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Have you ever thought of expanding into doing this, but in regards to the EU?
It's already, you know, the European Parliament already has a website which is good enough. You can look at all the debates.
I mean, yes, but you're doing this specifically for Bulgarian citizens, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So the majority of Bulgarian citizens do not care about the EU, and they don't really understand how it works. So considering that people are already interested in your website and they're already getting a lot of information about the way our own system works, we are a European country, so wouldn't it be an interesting idea just to try? Have you thought about that, or?
Well, so there are EU elections coming up soon, so we might think of something about. We might do something about that. I don't know what exactly we can do. The thing is, the data. You know, with this project, there is a very big added value because you can see what the official website looks like. So, you know, there is much that we can improve easily. You know, with not a lot of effort, we can make it much better. But you know, the website of the EU Parliament is already good enough. So there's not really much value we can add. And, you know, there is votewatch.eu, which already does a good job for people.
It disappeared.
It disappeared?
Yeah.
Wait, it doesn't exist?
No, it doesn't exist.
Really?
Yeah, the guy.
When did it disappear?
Really?
Were they like some sort of cyber criminals?
No, they had issues in terms of revenues, and they decided to close it. And the guy to me, because I sent an email, I said, what's going on, guys? I mean, I don't see you. And apparently he's thinking for the new project. It's going to be a kind of vote watch 2.0. So he's still using the same concept, but because they had a...
Sadly, they cannot invest in STRAZHA because we don't accept that.
No, but they want to have something new, so it's still in the making. So,
yeah.
Apparently they had an issue in terms of income. I mean,
you know, let me just say, it's usually a bad idea for a project to overextend because that makes it vulnerable and it can fail. you know, if you have too many responsibilities with your project, then you're likely to fail at all of them. But if you have few, then you can excel at some of them, and that's something that we prefer in our project. You know, we're doing something really good right now, and you know, at least that's my thinking. The direction I want to go in is just make the Bulgarian parliament more accessible to Bulgarians. Even though I think someone should do it, and it's a good thing that this guy's making 2.0 of VoteWatch.
The main difference between VoteWatch and you guys, that VoteWatch you had to pay to get access to most.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was super expensive. So you were free, and they were paying like have access to the data with cost of like subscription was about 3,000 euros.
I'm assuming no student would do that.
And I would sometimes get some free 1 month.
Like
free,
a Black
so
Friday,
I could,
or
I could use the data, or I could ask for the students also to use the data, but yeah, that was the main.
So yeah, I just want to say our funding model actually makes us very vulnerable because we're dependent on there being like a media buzz about us. You know, the moment the media stops talking about our project, all the donations stop. So we make people, you know, we encourage people to start recurring donations, you know, monthly donations. And, you know, we have some, let's say 1,000 leva a month, but, you know, they are going down because people get tired. So it's very vulnerable, like I'm saying. The more things we want to do, the higher likelihood there is that at one point we just wouldn't be able to cope with all the workload. You want to ask something?
Yes, I have 2 questions actually.
Okay, go ahead.
This one's related to what you just said now, with donations falling. Might this be due to the fact that people are nowadays lacking confidence in Bulgarian politics?
Well, I'll tell you what it's about, at least my personal interpretation. So, first thing is, people might donate for some time and then they decide that, you know, the initial emotion they had, like they see this and they say, wow, this is really nice. Then suddenly it fades away. Like that's perfectly normal. You're impressed in the moment and then you kind of get used to it with time. It doesn't look as impressive. You know, to me, when I first did all of this, before I started doing it, I actually thought it was all impossible. You know, I thought there was no way I would actually extract all the statements from all the transcripts. I thought it would be really difficult and almost impossible. But when I did it, now it's like, you know, like it's like a baseline for me now. It doesn't feel so impressive anymore. Yeah.
One thing is that when we post on Facebook, maybe, stuff that in a way may help one party or another, the followers of that particular party will come and donate for us. But then, if we post something that might hurt the party, same party in the future, they're coming and canceling their donations.
I'll just tell you directly. So when we made an analysis of voting patterns and we posted, you know, some pictures which, let's say, showed STRAZHA in a bad light, then we got many donations. You know, that was probably our best month, was July, because of these posts. But then when we posted something that, let's say, presents other parties in a bad light, let's say, you know, Democratic Bulgaria, or can we continue the change? All right, we continue. Yeah, so when you actually present them in a bad light, we actually lost donations. And so it seems that it's really difficult to be impartial and at the same time increasing our donations. So what right now we're trying to do is not to offend anyone, but then when you don't offend anyone, you don't really get these big donations anymore because people donate more money when they have some kind of emotion. And yeah, that was actually, I felt really sad back then because what we did was we made a platform where you could see party finances, so you could see who is funding these parties, like Democratic Bulgaria, we continue to change, you know, who is funding all the parties. But you know, they are the ones that are relying more on donations, while other parties have subsidies or other methods of financing. And so this is the point where we made something more transparent and people didn't like us for it. They actually hated us for it. And that's when we actually lost donations. So yeah, it's remaining impartial and at the same time increasing our donations is a challenge, basically. Yeah. So yeah, anyone else want to ask something? Yeah.
I mean, isn't that normal? I'm assuming WikiLeaks didn't really have a lot of donations at the beginning either, but they just stayed impartial and kept on putting out information.
Well, it's difficult to actually be impartial because people think it's impartial when you, like, let's say you're an investigative journalist, but you only investigate one side. And, you know, people say you're impartial because you're just investigating, you know, you're just looking at information. But, you know, you're not investigating, let's say, the other side, and that is, that makes you partial. So, even though people perceive you as impartial, you might still be partial, is what I'm saying.
I mean,
It's
by
not factual. I mean, you try to be as factual as
yeah,
possible.
I was just gonna
You
say,
choose what to show people.
Yeah, I know the thing
Yeah.
is.
And how to show it.
Yeah, of course.
from what I understand, you guys just put out data. That's it.
Yeah.
You
And I
cannot
think
really be
that's-
partial
we
in
discussed
that.
Last time we saw each other, and the thing is, and that's a very thin line, of course. We discussed that. Whether at some point it would be useful to. This is what you've been trying to do in your Facebook. Some of the Facebook things you put on Facebook is to have, because to tell you the truth, I think that even though those data are very important, but the thing is, most of the people will be completely lost in front of those data. So
Yeah.
I think that
You need to present it.
some kind of interpretative analysis
Yeah.
of things, just to show what those data can tell us. You know, without having like the 5-page essay on something, but like a small, for example, the story you said about the voting patterns, they were quite, I mean, you know, or the,
Yeah.
and that's kind of small factual things.
Brasco
that-
worked on it.
Yes, okay, so.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the analysis.
And then you
the
have
thing
to,
is, what
you
we
have to
try,
translate some of them in English, so it gives you.
like
a
the
bit
thing
more-
we
give you
try
a
to
bit
do
more
is just
exposure.
explain the data, like not show what's bad, what's not bad.
Right.
Like you could delay the whole legislative process, like GERB did it. They basically took the time to talk a lot of
Yeah.
about nonsense,
Yeah.
and they do that by means of procedural like tricks. Like they do the in Bulgarian it's procedure for назначение на водене. That basically means they go on the tribune and like talk to the chairman of the National Assembly, and they use like linguistic acrobatics, like they address the chairman of the National Assembly, but they say that like we continue change is bad. Like, Mr. Chairman, why don't you like tell them that they're bad? They basically did that all the time because it's in the rules.
Yeah.
And like we present that as like, look, like they do it all the time, but we never said that's a bad thing because it's in the rules after all.
Yeah, and you know, people like us when we do that, but you know, when we show things that are about their own party, then people don't like it.
It's not.
You can tell the story of the party, like what drove the supporters of Democratic Bulgaria away from supporting us.
Yeah, so
Something we found, like what we found in the party finances.
So the thing is, in that the data we collected was about I think it was 32 parties that were represented in the last 11 years, and we looked at which party has collected the most donations. And you know, I'm interested. Do you want to guess?
GERB?
Not even close, actually.
Yeah, that's close enough. So the thing is, the data is from 2011 to 2021, and it wasn't founded. You know, the party itself wasn't founded. So they had so the donations were going through votes.
The party
The
vote,
party
it's a
vote,
carrier party, like they took the
Yeah.
mandate of the party to participate in the election.
Yeah. So the truth is that the party that has collected the most donations in that period, you know, and this year probably we continue to change has surpassed them. But you know, the ones that collected the most donations is Yes Bulgaria, and it's collected most of these donations last year. You know, as I guess probably that's the donations that are coming for the coalition itself, not just the party. For their 3 campaigns, they've collected more money than anyone. Now it's important to note here that other parties that we can call systemic parties, they've been for years they have been parliamentary represented, and they have amassed a lot of money through the subsidy. So that's why they don't really receive that many donations. That's why GERB has actually been getting about 20 million leva each year from the subsidy, so they don't really need donations.
And DPC had their first donations last year.
Yeah.
The previous years, no donations at all.
It's a weird case, right?
Yeah, so that's why I don't have donations. And actually the thing that we got criticized about is that we actually tried to find out who are the biggest donors.
Sorry.
And what we found was that all the biggest donors have donated to either Yes Bulgaria or We Continue the Change. What's interesting is the fifth biggest donor, who, you know, everyone from the top four has some kind of business. You know, you can actually find that they have a big business and they have a lot of money. But the fifth one was this 26-year-old that the only thing we can find about him was that he was a photographer. And that's why we made a post where he was mentioned as a photographer. And then people from Democratic Bulgaria got really, really mad at us. Like, they were texting me, all these people. Like, even Buzhanov texted me to meet right away. It was like they were really, for some reason, they didn't really like this. We actually did meet and we didn't talk about something. You know, we didn't have we didn't talk about anything in particular. I don't know what the meeting was about. Anyway.
I get scared.
Yeah, but it was like it seems that really upset them for some reason. And that is what actually turned away many of our followers. Because for the first time we actually showed something which was, you know, sort of fishy in their own party. You know, because many of our fans are actually members of Democratic Bulgaria. And people who donate to us also are from Yes Bulgaria, because, you know, Yes Bulgaria has a culture of these organic donations. Even though they do collect some very, very big donations, they've only been in the past year. In the previous years, they've also followed sort of a crowdfunding model. Like from 2017 to 2020, let's say, they've also had a large number of small donations. You know, they're the only party which you can say that they have such a donation structure. But, you know, we showed something about them which was not very flattering, and our fans hated us for it, and they canceled their donations. So that's one of these instances when you actually show something, and it actually, you know, that was the first time when we made something more transparent and lost for it. You know, because each of our previous times we've attacked different parties. We've attacked GERB, there is such a people, DPC. You know, it was STRAZHA. Every single party we've attacked, we've gotten like...
We've shown data that's kind of like...
Yeah, okay, not attacked. We've shown unflattering data. Yeah, so then we were liked for it. But the first time we actually showed data about Yes Bulgaria, we were attacked by them. And
then there is the case with We Continue Change.
Yeah,
Like
we also angered them.
We did a platform that basically is like a political compass for like the Bulgarian system, and everybody agreed to answer our questions except for We Continue Change. And when we tried to get their answers, they turned against us.
Yeah,
they said that's something undemocratic.
Yeah. So let me just say about this.
Weird case.
Yeah. So there was a questionnaire that we prepared with students' club of politology or something.
With friends.
Yeah, with friends. We made this questionnaire, and then we sent it to 10 different parties. So 3 of them rejected to answer the questionnaire. They were STRAZHA, We Continue the Change, and Democratic Bulgaria. So with Democratic Bulgaria, we had some contact. We asked them really nicely, and they agreed to answer some of the questions. And so they answered some of the questions, but we decided, you know, okay, they answered the questions, it's fine. Then STRAZHA, when we actually released the test, so the test was based on the questionnaire, right? When you answer questions, if you answer the same way as the party, you get a higher percentage for that party, right? That's how the test works. So with STRAZHA, when we released the test and we mentioned that they have not responded to our questions, that's when they actually decided to answer our questions. That's when, you know, they decided to get more active. And then the only one left was We Continue the Change. So we made a post to shame them because, you know, they were the only ones left. democratic Bulgaria and STRAZHA had, succumbed to our pressure. But we continue to change. Even though they felt some pressure, they decided they were not going to succumb to our pressure. And they said that our test was profanizing the political debate.
It was I guess they were simplifying it, skewing it towards a direction they didn't like, apparently. They just didn't
they actually said our test was bad for voters. Yeah,
I think that is connected to these particularly to Yes Bulgaria and We Continue the Change. These two parties, they really want to look presentable and reliable to people, and when something about them that is not particularly flattering to that image, like they want to be like, yes, we are the people who will change this nation. Yes, we don't engage in any questionable activities. And when some kind of data about them doing something a little questionable gets out, their image gets like.
I just want to correct you just for a second here. You are exactly right about what you're saying. Now, each party wants to look presentable. The thing about these two parties is they want to actually look like they have the moral high ground.
Exactly.
So that's the thing about them, is that they're supposed to be the good guys and everyone else is supposed to be the bad guys. Other parties are okay. Like people know they're sort of corrupt, but they prefer them, let's say, with other parties. Some people sincerely vote for GERB, and they just think it's, even though it's a party which has been compromised, it's better than everyone else for them. But with these two parties, they do want to have the moral high ground, and that's all they're based on, basically.
Yeah, about the Yes Bulgaria, Democratic Bulgaria, and We Continue the Change. I think that they didn't answer to our questions because they're relatively new parties and their electorate is very fluid. So they have people who are left or right.
And that's only We Continue to Change. With Democratic Bulgaria, it's not exactly like this. But you're right about this. It's a fluid. They have a fluid electorate, and so with We Continue to Change, is that they don't actually want to take positions. They don't want to say whether they're left or right. They just want people to vote for them, so that they can fight corruption. That's I guess that's like the basic message they have, and they're willing to, By the way, I saw this interview with Kirill Petkov in 2017. Back then, he was actually a member of Yes Bulgaria. In that interview, he was speaking for Yes Bulgaria. So he was speaking for the party, and it's very interesting that he was saying the same things that he says right now. It's like back then he had the same vision about these things. He was saying, "Oh, we shouldn't be left or right. That's like an old thing."
Left means with right instruments.
Yeah, left. Yeah, left. Yeah.
I wasn't even the one who said that. Because I listened to the interview too. The only thing that basically remained is that he says, like, we only accept honorable people in our party.
That's the same
like
thing.
only
No,
one
yeah,
party.
let's say about the left-right thing as well. I think that's how I remember. Anyway, so yeah, want to talk about the euro?
Yeah.
So
I'll actually leave the debate for now, like the euro part.
What?
I will leave the debate for now.
Oh yeah, sure. This is too much for you.
I might come
understand.
back, but I have a thing, so.
Okay.
Nothing personal.
Huh? Nah.
All right. So about the euro, I think that I think there are basically like two camps here. So one of them is like the pro-Russia camp, where basically they just want to destabilize the EU. So that's the main reason they don't want the euro. I think it's because. So let's say, for example, a party like STRAZHA. So right now they're talking against the EU, but in the past, every single issue they've taken on, they've always taken on the anti-EU and anti-NATO position. So it's like the only thing that's consistent about them is that they're anti-West, and that seems like the biggest reason they're against the euro. And that's like a big geopolitical goal of Russia, is to destabilize the EU. So we should all be bickering amongst ourselves. and we should be too busy to actually look at Russia. You know, the same with the USA. The Russian interference in US politics, the main goal is to make them too preoccupied with themselves, so that they, you know, like I say, they will bicker amongst themselves, and they don't want to look outside to Russia. Now the other side is I guess like the big business, the big finance guys. They all want the euro because it's better for them.
It's a stable currency nonetheless.
Yeah, and well, it's so, you know, there are many things to say here. It's a stable currency, and right now we are pegged to the euro anyway.
Yeah,
So
it's making a difference.
yeah, now
And you have great financial scrutiny, greater
Yeah.
transparency
Well,
of
we-
your institutions.
we actually think we have the
greater demands
Yeah.
in terms of probity of the main actors in the financial world.
So right now we are in year end 2. We're also in the banking union, I think.
Yeah.
So right now I think we are regulated by the European Central Bank currently. So yes, right now we do have all these things. So I can tell you the biggest difference, which will be with the euro, is that our government can take on much more loans, and that's like the most important thing. You know, so there wouldn't be any catastrophic inflation or anything. But the thing that certainly will be is that our government can take on much more loans, and so the scaremongering that they're doing is that we will end up in a Greek scenario. So we will take on so much loans that at one point, you know, we'll just go bankrupt. We'll default, which is, I guess that's a valid fear, but it's not very likely. We're far away from a Greek scenario right now, and we're probably far away for many, many years, even if we do take on a lot of loans. It is actually a very good opportunity for our country to make public investments. You know, that money can be spent on, well, you know, it can be spent well, it can be spent poorly, you know. But there is an opportunity to spend this money well to develop the Bulgarian economy. Now, I just want to say something about inflation, which I read in the report by the Bulgarian National Bank. So the thing about inflation is, the data shows that there is some inflation, and it's due to the fact that some prices get rounded. So let's say you have a coffee which costs 1 lev, and you wanna, you know, so we accept the euro, and now that coffee has to cost like 48 euro cents or like 52 euro cents or something. But you want to round it, and you're not going to round it down. You're more likely to round it up. So you might make it 60 cents, or you might make it 1 euro, and you're going to say, well, it's just 1 euro. People don't care. It's just coffee, right? And people are still going to buy it.
It would be a mechanical process that's
Yeah.
because all the things that are still very cheap. That's
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah, the
You
cheap
know.
things.
For example, you go around the corner, you have your little coffee for 50 sutinki. You know.
Yeah.
If you translate 50 sutinki in euro, it's 25 cents. You cannot pay 25 cents euros. So it would be 50 cents of a euro. So
Yeah.
the coffee would be 50 cents of a euro instead of 50 sutinki. But if you do that, you multiply by 2 the price of the coffee.
Yes, it's like 100%
You know,
inflation, but it's
without-
just coffee.
Without realizing it, and this is why actually is being noticed in all the countries in the Eurozone. And this was affecting the people the most, because it turned out that the things they buy the most, and they were used to buy very cheaply, because they buy it much more often, they see the impact
Yeah.
it has on them, even though on a global, because not economists, but economists have made studies like on the global level of prices, the euro has driven prices down, but the thing is, driven prices down of cars, of washing machines, but you don't buy washing machine every day, you don't buy a car
Yeah,
every day, so
that's
you
right.
don't, so there's a lot of perception, but it's true that because you're in your daily life, you think that things are getting more expensive
Yeah.
and you...
Actually, yeah,
Yes.
that's right. So the data shows that it's not so the actual inflation when countries take on the euro is like 0 something percent, but the inflation perceptions are much higher. So even though actual inflation, you know, like let's say people's monthly expenses haven't risen, you know, more than 0.5%, let's say, but their perception is of much higher inflation because think about it this way: the things you buy more often are the things that form your perception. So you get reminded more often that some price has risen when you buy a coffee. But coffee is like a small part of your monthly expenditures. So it's not a big contributor to inflation. Yeah.
Based on my understanding, like for example, if a Bulgarian citizen earns 1,600 leva per month, and like Bulgaria becomes in the Eurozone, wouldn't he or she earn 1,600 euros?
No, they're 800.
Because that's what I thought.
So yeah, you have to think about it this way. Right now, because we're pegged to the euro, our price level isn't determined by foreign exchange rate. So the foreign exchange rate is determined by stuff like import, export, and supply and demand of our currency. But we don't have this in Bulgaria because our currency is not free-floating. What actually determines our currency level, our price level, is how much money is flowing into or out of Bulgaria. Because our exchange rate cannot change, but the price level in Bulgaria can change. So let's say if we have more exports and we get more money into Bulgaria, then our price level is likely to increase, even though the exchange rate cannot change. And that's basically because the more we develop our economy, our inflation should be higher than EU inflation, than average Eurozone inflation. Because when you look at the price level in other countries, like purchasing power parity, their price level is like here, and ours is like here. And their price level is rising due to inflation, and ours is rising. But if we're going to have the same standard as other European countries, our price level needs to rise to their price level. So our wages are the same as theirs, and our prices are the same as theirs. But if that's going to happen, then our inflation needs to be higher. So that's something that needs. So even though they are right that the euro, the central bank policy of the ECB will make more inflation in Bulgaria, but that's perfectly natural in the long run because we're supposed to reach their price level at some point. That includes wages and other prices.
The price will start aligning themselves.
Yeah.
But salaries will lag behind. So you have this kind of.
Sorry, what will lag behind?
I mean wages.
Salaries, yeah.
So the thing is, you have this very difficult period of 5-10 years when you have a discrepancy between actually the level of prices, because price would equalize at the level of the Eurozone, and so Bulgaria is part of the Eurozone, but salaries in Bulgaria will take much more time for the salaries to increase and to catch up with the level of prices. And this is something that can be difficult. This is what, by the way, Italy experienced, and this is why made the Italians so pissed, with the euro. And this partly was also the issue of migration. They also got very pissed what happened. Explained the rising of the extreme right, and now you have an extreme right. You have a Rajden-like party in government.
Wow.
I mean, God forbid. Mr. Kopechnik, is not yet prime minister, but the thing is, those things can happen because they have happened already in other countries. So the psychological aspect and the perception, the subjective aspect, the emotional aspects is taken over much more on the rational aspect of it. But the thing is, politics is rely on emotion and rationality much more than on rationalities, and this was going to be. It's going to be difficult,
In here, it really doesn't matter what the numbers are saying. Fact doesn't matter here because if we are part of the EU zone and parties like STRAZHA or far-right populists will always find a way, especially with Facebook, to polarize everything with extremes. And with COVID, what happened with COVID? There were public figures who were talking against COVID measures, but they were vaccinated, and this divided the whole society in Bulgaria.
But for this to work, you need to have a context. You need to have a favorable context. Okay, COVID-19, you had this favorable context when people were pissed because of COVID. You know,
Yeah.
people were so you have this euro. This euro can create this kind of toxic, context, and some and then this is very easy for those populists and extreme rights. You know, they will use all kind of arguments. You know, Bulgaria, we are losing our independence. You know, we are being sold to the West. You know, is Bulgaria independent nowadays? You may ask us the questions. Are you really independent? No, of course, no. You're not. You're independent by name, but you know. So all those things are going to work on emotions, and if the context is favorable, it can really boost the.
Yeah, well, they say that Bulgaria is a colony of the United States. That's their claim.
But you know, there was a survey made before Bulgaria joined the EU, because I was following those things, and I arrived in Bulgaria in 2007. Not yesterday. But the thing is that there was a survey being made at some point where the majority of Bulgarians wanted Bulgaria to be ruled by the EU and not to be ruled by the Bulgarians.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean.
That's true, yeah.
Speaking about colony, you know, the thing is actually, and it was the first case where actually the country were asking to be colonized. You know, please colonize us, you know, because we're so pissed and so fed up with all the national politicians. It's not a colony.
Actually, that is the most important thing here, is that Bulgarians are just very skeptical of the political class. They believe the political class wants to hurt them, wants to take their money away, take their jobs away. You know, they just think that the political class doesn't care about them. And that's why it's so easy for people like STRAZHA to make this into an anti-EU rhetoric. So for example, they're saying stuff like, you know, they're just doing this because they're serving their masters, and their masters are the EU and the US. And, you know, they don't care about you. And it's stuff like that they're using, which is, it's really easy for them to believe this. Because like I say, people have been, they've had a lot of disappointments in the past 30 years.
And it works. It works. I mean, the thing is, I was seeing people like, because the thing is, those parties, they have their logic. You may disagree with them, you may agree with them, but they have a certain logic in what they say. Okay. I mean, the extreme right, the pro-Russian, they have a certain logic in saying that, you know, you see the war in Russia, because of war we have sanctions, because sanctions prices are going up, and your life is much more difficult. And instead of condemning Russia, we should help the Russians. And after all, it was because of bloody NATO that wanted to expand it. And why should NATO be expanded? Why should be part of NATO? And, you know, this kind of logic. The thing, and it's very difficult for the other side now, is to because no, when you go and see people, Ali, you can tell them Bulgaria should be part of the EU, should be part of NATO. That's not enough. You should explain. You should. You know, and it's much more difficult because it's much more easier to be destructive than to be constructive, as you very well know. But the thing is, you know, you have to take some time and try to explain to people, you know, and those things are sometimes complicated. But you have to come with a counter narrative. You have to find a story for them. Because the extreme right have a story. They've already made a story that is very efficient, and you have to work out the story. I mean, the thing is, sometimes the other side is being blamed for not being too proactive.
There is one story which I think was pro-Western, people stopped believing in it. So I think there is a tendency for Bulgarians to overestimate foreign influence. So Bulgarians have thought that, for example, they used to think that when we join the EU, living standard is going to increase rapidly. You know, living standard has increased objectively.
Significantly.
Yeah, significantly since we joined the EU.
No, it's true. We know.
Yeah, but it hasn't been as high.
It's been like this.
Yeah, actually.
For different people, impacting them differently. So if you live in a small village in the Rhodope, you know, I can tell you, and if you live in South.
So yeah, actually, so about the economic development of Bulgaria. So the biggest rise in GDP you see between 2001 and 2008. But actually, that is a period which is, you know, a lot of expansion in many countries. So then you have the financial crisis, and that's when we joined the EU 1 year before the financial crisis. And then you have a stagnation, which is maybe like 5 or 6 years. And then it took...
Borisov years.
Sorry?
About the Borisov years.
Yeah, that was the first 2 terms of Borisov. Then you have 2016. You have a very rapid rise in GDP again. So from 2016 to 2020, so that's the 3rd term of Borisov. But then you have something else. That's the period where inequality in Bulgaria has increased to the highest in the EU. So even though our GDP has risen a lot, not many people have seen this improvement in their own lives.
Yeah.
And that's why they become anti-EU, I guess.
And also they don't really understand the fact that this is basically like the normal way that the business cycle works. Like there is always going to be a period of fall, stagnation, rise, and this cycle continues within the span of 15 years. This is basically the Keynesian model of capitalism.
That's true. Yeah, but the thing is, even though that's true, when the GDP rises, people should feel it in their own lives.
Yeah.
What we see in so right now it is true that Bulgaria has the highest inequality in the whole EU, and that has actually happened in that span of 4 years, from 2016 to 2020. And it seems that this is because the expansion of the economy has, I guess, perhaps has only benefited a small percentage of the population, which I guess that same percentage is very pro-Western because of this, because they've seen that their own lives have become better, during the period that we've been in the EU. But other people have possibly been feeling left behind. And it's usually these people that have been feeling left behind by progress that they become more susceptible to far-right rhetoric. And it's the same in other countries as well.
Yeah, I think the inequality gap has increased in every EU member state.
It was the highest in Bulgaria right
It
now.
was the highest in Bulgaria too. Maybe linked to kind of take-off phenomenon. When the economy is shooting, when it's growing very fast, it's normal that the effect is not dripping too much down, and that you have like the 5-10% are benefiting the most from this sharp rise. And of course, it takes time for the effects to go down. But it's true to say that every country in the EU has witnessed such a rising inequality that may be a reason to explaining the extreme voting in certain countries. I mean, it's like, and France is, in some political system are different because they're a bit more stable, a bit of a different culture. So even though you have the same context, the same causes sometimes do not produce the same effects because of the local realities and there are differences. But it's not something that is unique to Bulgaria. It happened to Brazil too, when Brazil took off a lot economically. I mean, you have huge inequality in a country like Brazil, which is even much bigger in Bulgaria, I would expect.
Yeah, they have huge
So,
inequality.
Yes.
It's usually expansion does benefit more the wealthy. So you do see that you have a rise in inequality when you have such an expansion of the economy as well. The thing is, though, after this expansion, we've been in this crisis with COVID and now the war, and that's when the people who are most vulnerable are starting to feel their position much more. They feel that they're much more vulnerable now, while other people who don't feel so vulnerable. So, for example, people right now, and I think that's something the polls show as well, are very concerned about inflation and their living standards. That's like possibly most Bulgarians. But then there is a part of Bulgarians who are fairly comfortable and don't really care much about these factors. And they only think about corruption and, it's this problem that these two parts of Bulgarian society cannot get together. I think that's a fundamental problem.
It's very strange because to be very crude and very direct, you have people buying mobile phones for 800 and 1,000 leva. Sorry, but no, I'm not joking. You have the thing is, you have people complaining they don't have any money and things are too expensive. At the same time, when you see the mobile phones they are using, they are using a much more expensive mobile phone than I use myself. So the thing is, sometimes, you wonder. I mean, guys. I mean, the thing is, of course, your price of energy is increasing, but be a bit sensible.
I
And the
think
fact
that
is,
is.
Bulgarians, I'm sorry to say this, my outsider's perspective, you know, you guys are great consumers. You're not consuming a lot in Bulgaria. I mean, you are
Not only
rational
we're
consumers.
we're really concerned about public image and seeming rich.
Yes.
Basically,
Yes.
you will see a person living in a one-bedroom apartment who is
And
is
a
paying
holding
like
car, yes.
who is paying like 300 level rent, and they're basically driving like a new car, and you're like, where do you get that money for this
On
car?
that regard with the phones, I did something interesting like a research on, in my neighborhood. It is extremely poor neighborhood, and there are around 30,000 people who are living in the neighborhood, and I calculated that if at least half of them are adults and have mobile phone, and the median of the phone is like 700 less because it's okay money for a phone. In that particular neighborhood, which is extremely poor, we have only in phones more than a couple, like 3 million less, which is extreme,
3,000.
No, 3 million less. Invest only in phones in
Phones, okay.
in very
Oh, yes,
poor
in phones.
neighborhoods.
Okay.
And
Fine.
then if you add the cars and everything, you have money, but depends how you spend it.
Well, yeah, but you need a phone to, do most of the things you do today.
But the real indicator of poverty actually has been used for a long time is the share of your revenue that's been used for your direct subsistence. I mean food,
Yeah,
right?
sure, yeah.
So the real poor people, they spend 80% of their available income to buy foods, and the rest they will use for their accommodation. And if they're really poor, they don't have any money for the rest. Okay? But the problem, because we are a consumerist society, right? So and people need to look good, and kids are terrible because I witness with kids too. You have this kind of pressure on kids, Look at my phone. I'm sure it's not and yet my son insists so much that I buy myself a new. This is the new phone I bought yesterday. And but the thing is, I don't need to buy a phone every year. I don't need to buy a new phone every year. I can live very well. But the pressure is so much on all those people. And what is even more cruel is that it hits the poorest people are the best consumers.
Yeah.
Because those are the ones changing their phones every year. In Britain, there was a study being made that banks, in terms of loans, they were targeting those are poor people. And of course, different in Britain because you receive a lot of social benefits. So they had a very small income, but it was very stable because they were receiving benefits. So the banks were targeting those people, give them as many loans as possible, because as they have a guaranteed kind of stable income, they would always be able to repay something, and they were inciting them to buy even bigger cars and things like that. So it's
Should we continue
yes,
the
yes.
discussion on
Yes.
Yeah, someone had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to about the Eurozone. Sorry, sorry for going all the way back to it, but because you were saying that we could end up in a Greece type scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, and also the extreme polarization of people and inside the country when it's about money, about inflation, if the EU was a good choice, if it wasn't, etc. Technically, if we get in the Eurozone, wouldn't that mean that yes, we could get more loans, but also there will be more control over if we get those loans and what we use them for?
Well, there are criteria we need to follow even right now.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about the Greece scenario, so let me just summarize it. The thing about Greece is that Greece had been getting all these loans, and the investors had the assumption that basically these loans were guaranteed by the whole Eurozone. So Greece was able to borrow with much lower interest rates, and basically had the same trust as, let's say German debt. And that's why investors were very eager to loan to Greece. Then when the financial crisis hit, Greece started getting these very big deficits and was in very big trouble. Then what happened was that the Eurozone actually decided to leave them on their own. So even though everyone was assuming that this debt would be guaranteed by the whole Eurozone, it seems that that wasn't so guaranteed. And that's when you had the ECB and the IMF and the World Bank enforce these austerity measures on the Greek economy, on the Greek budget. So now they have a very big contraction of their economy because of this. And right now Greece is in really bad shape because of this, actually.
Yes, but that happened once, and there were mechanisms in place
Yeah,
to
actually, after
prevent
this,
that.
they created this mechanism whereby if someone, if one of the countries in the Eurozone has problem repaying their debt, then there's a mechanism through which all the other countries can step in and help with that. So actually, yeah, that is, when it happened the first time, it was a really big problem, and that's why people started paying attention to this problem. And if it happens in the future, then probably, we'll be more careful. The Eurozone will be more careful, and our government will be more careful knowing that this could happen. But like I'm saying, in the beginning, there was the assumption that whatever happens, the Eurozone will take on the debt. And that's why investors were eager to lend to Greece. And that was the main problem, because this assumption was tested, and they saw that that's not completely true. That even though Greece is in the Eurozone, that doesn't mean that the Eurozone should be responsible for their debts. And that's when, that's when the trouble actually hit. So a Greek scenario in Bulgaria, even if it is possible, right now we have a very low debt, like 30% of GDP or something, I think. Yeah, so if we're gonna get...
Actually, financially, Bulgaria is in a very good shape, financially speaking. Maybe a poor country, but actually surprisingly in good shape in terms of public finances.
Culture and monetary culture.
The problem also in the Greek case, I don't know if Bulgaria too, is that, because I always take the example, we discussed that in the class too, but the Belgian debt was at the time competing with the Greek debt. I mean,
Which one?
The Belgian.
Belgium?
Yes.
Oh.
But the main difference between the Belgian debt and the Greek debt is that the Belgian debt was owned by 90% by the Belgians. So it was the safest debt in the world, because the Belgian people had the culture of saving, first of all. And one of the ways of saving money in Belgium was to buy those kind of public bonds. These are debts. And it was very safe, because you had a 2% interest rate, it's guaranteed by the state, it's very stable, so a lot of good, responsible, Belgian families, this is the way they will actually save money, So they invested in their own debt, so it was the safest in the world. So when you have that situation, you can overshoot, of course, I must say at some point, of course it cracks, but you can be in debt a lot because it's very safe. The Greek problem is that 90% of the Greek debt was owned by non-Greek people or non-Greek entities,
Yeah.
And when those guys, of course, when the first problems happened, when they started selling, all the things they had, and the system was collapsing, the Greeks, all those guys, they were not saving a penny. It is kind of a golden rule in Belgium. There was part of my own education. I feel I have to save every month part of my salary. For me, I feel like a moral obligation to do that. And if I spend all the money in my salary, I feel so guilty. For me, it's like the terrible sin. It's not responsible. It's different culture. You need this kind of saving culture versus spending cultures.
Yeah, that part of Europe doesn't really have that type of culture too.
No.
In Bulgaria, we have this culture of getting check by how it's called.
Check by check, basically.
yeah.
Salary by salary. Like you
Yeah.
spend everything, you wait for the next
tomorrow,
one.
I'm going to die tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of, no, you're going to die. First of all, you may die tomorrow, but you have a family to take care of. So the thing is, you have responsibility.
That's why we take loans.
Okay.
Yeah, so the family has to pay for the...
Exactly.
I'm proposing that we can continue all
Yes,
the talks over the
sheets and the portal.
yes.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you. And I will invite you guys, if you do, because I say that for research purposes, it can be interesting to use STRAZHA too. It's another way of using
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah. If you want
and
So,
it will
yeah.
be
if you have like a small research paper you want to do or something, and you know, and
Okay, let me just say what kind of data we have.
yes.
So there are basically three things. One is basically who has been a representative in the parliament. That's 20 years back from 2001 to today. Who has been an MP, how long, you know, from which date to which date. That's like the history of the parliament, which is, you know, it's very dynamic actually. Then the second thing is the voting patterns. So in each plenary session, who has voted how on what motion. And then the third one is basically a big database of statements. So you have like the statement, and then you have it linked to the identity of the person, which is something that the official website does not have. So this is, you know, this is the kind of data that nobody has except us. You have a statement, and it's linked to the person saying it. So you can have, let's say, you can take one person, you can have all of his statements in a file, let's say, and you can look through them. You can do some kind of analysis with them. So one thing that we've been doing with John, which is really interesting, is seeing how speech has evolved through time. So for example, you can take one word or one concept, let's say you can have 100 words which are related to a particular concept. And then you can see how, you know, you can see like a chart how much it has been spoken about in Parliament. You can, for example, link that, you can correlate it to certain events or something. You can also see which parliamentary groups have been speaking more about a particular thing. And that's also really interesting to see how the debate has evolved through time.
We did that with Russia, EU sanctions, and to see the normalized frequency of use of those terms, because of course bigger parties will talk much more than the kind of smaller parties. So we have to normalize the data to be comparable. So not surprisingly, we saw, for example, when it came to Russia, NATO, and EU, that the extreme right, Brezhnev was, you know, using not extreme, but also Democracy of Bulgaria. Of course, it doesn't tell you anything about the positions of the different countries or different parties, but it gives you an idea what is important for them in their kind of statements they are making in Parliament. You know, the kind of issues that are important for them and the kind of issues that are important for the Bulgarian Parliament. So actually Bulgarian politics, you know, which issue is increasing in terms of importance, what issue is decreasing.
On that, there is a guy called Nicola Tulechki. His NGO is called Data for Good, Data for Good, and he did an analysis on that, but on social media. And turns out that
that's what
complex. Dominating the whole.
They are using a lot of social media. They've been because it's good, cheap, and they've been investing a lot. And I think that the change was very bad in the realizing this.
I want to comment on that. We can see an example of like powerful social media usage, especially on Facebook, where there's a lot of misinformation. We know about that. Where during the COVID protests in Sofia, the reasons they were done was mostly because of social media, because of the way Vizrajdania was.
Yeah, so actually about Tulechki, I was at this presentation of his, and what he said was that when they enacted the green certificate is when, so basically he showed this chart through time, so the pages of different parties, how much interactions they've been getting. And so they've all been, you know, sort of, let's say, proportional to their popularity in the country. Then you have STRAZHA, which was, you know, somewhere at the bottom. And then when they enacted the green certificate, STRAZHA shot up. And right now, so well, at least when I was watching his presentation, STRAZHA had about 60% of online interactions, in parties. Of online party interactions. So that's only the pages of parties and the profiles of parties. Yeah. So
I have access to his data, so we can check it for today. Yeah, it will be interesting because it is constantly changing, and STRAZHA is.
yeah, they're dominating right now.
They're dominating Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
But I think Gorisov is also using Facebook a lot.
Also, the comment
Gorisov.
section on the posts of Возражение are literally comedy gold. Like literally, Kupeikin, the guy that is the leader of Возражение, is basically said that his children voted for him as well. And someone commented under that post, "Wow, he procreated." Yeah.
Yeah, so it's possible that all the commenters are Russian trolls, because many
Or Bulgarian trolls.
There are Bulgarian.
there are people who honestly think this way, but
No, there are actually Bulgarian trolls, like firms that create internet trolling. Actually, yeah, there are. I think a couple of them. There are a couple.
I mean, they might be sponsored by Russia, though. So.
well, yeah, possibly the money is coming from Russia, but yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's the same model that they have used in Russia. They're using it all over the world with their internet trolls, and they're following the same pattern right now. Actually, Возражение seems to be using social media the same way that Russian trolls were using it before Возражение appeared on the public scene. So it's obvious where they got their know-how from.
But the Democratic Bulgaria also tried to implement it in a way and they failed. So.
Well, Democratic Bulgaria is also really powerful in social media, by the way. And I guess I think we can call them trolls because they have like this group of people that. So what they do, I don't know how much is trolling, but what they do actually is that they have these groups inside the party where when they have a post that they need to boost, like they need to like it and share it and support and comment it, they just share it in these groups, and there are many people in these groups. So I don't know if that's trolling, but that's like they're supporting their content on social media. They're boosting it up because they're, in the algorithm when a post gets many likes in the first minutes or first hour, Facebook shows it to many more people. And that's why they do it. That's how they give an initial boost to their content. And that's just a social media strategy. I mean, it's not even...
It's not even a strategy, it's just the way it works.
What they're also doing is to use Facebook pages of all those strange groups, that you have people for Bansko or people for Blagoevgrad, or you have even the Hunters Association or something, and the Hunter Association of something, you see a lot of posts by the extreme right, for example.
Yep.
We don't see from the PP. So you have those kind of strange groups that mushroom, and
they are growing.
you have presence of certain parties.
Like
one
of the biggest local groups is Забелязано в Blagoevgrad, which translates to Noticed in Blagoevgrad, which they discuss anything from someone having taken a picture with someone with the license plate number to like discussing politics, local politics. Especially in Blagoevgrad there has especially been a lot of backlash on the mayor of the city and stuff like that. So such Facebook groups can be a hub for people to.
So that can be authentic, but it can also be a manipulation. There can be like an army of trolls which are trying to undermine people's trust in the mayor.
I was saying that it's kind of a hub for misinformation.
That's how it works.
I mean, at this point, I think you're overestimating the trolls. It used to be trolls. At this point, people will just believe anything. They're not intentionally trolling.
Also, it really depends how parties utilize Facebook and its options.
Yeah.
Because GERB, when I did my last research, they had more than 10,000 posts for 1 month. And then Возражение had like 1,000. But the problem is, GERB is producing all of this content, same content, sharing through their own local pages. GERB Blagoevgrad, GERB Plovdiv, or whatever. People don't follow these pages, but Возражение are producing different posts with same messages from different pages of their candidates.
So actually, I just want to say something which again Tulechki was researching. And this was these funny pages. So people on Facebook made these funny pages, like very, non-political stuff, just, jokes or football, like motivating captions, whatever. And the people join these groups, and, just ordinary people who are not politicized in any way. And then basically every fourth post is a link to some fake media where, you can read horrible things about NATO or whatever. And it's like these groups and these pages, they start with these funny posts that don't have anything to do with politics. So they can lure in ordinary people who are not very politically fanatical. And then they just radicalize them with all this misinformation. And it's kind of subtle in the beginning because they don't really, if it was just all these propaganda posts, then people wouldn't follow the page. But it's mostly funny stuff, and then extreme propaganda once in a while.
Partly they grow their own Facebook pages, but partly, I was part of this problem too, I guess. A couple years ago I had a Facebook page related to clothes and stuff with more than 20,000 likes. And one guy approached me, he offered me to buy my page, Facebook page. I sold my Facebook page because free money, I was in high school, I don't know. Then 2 months later I see that they're posting to more than 20,000 people politics, and they're buying pages also.
Yeah.
I mean, we also don't have any type of laws to regulate that.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to regulate. It's I don't know if it's even possible.
It
I think
is.
it's apparently the effect it has on voting, for example, on people's attitudes, is either extremely difficult to measure, and so far is doesn't show any convincing. In other words, I don't think there's a huge correlation between the investment you make in that and the results you get at elections, for example. So it may be, it's still, the discussion is still open, and there are a lot of skepticism, and I don't know if this is going to continue and to grow, or whether at a certain point some political parties will realize that it's not worth the level of investment. I don't know, I'm not a specialist,
Really, for example, with STRAZHA, usually far right in Bulgaria, they have like stable electorate here, about 1,000, 1,050, 150,000, yeah, in Bulgaria. But the problem now is that on the last elections we had 39% of people going to vote, and this it really depends how different parties can make their own people go and vote. If you can motivate far-right people to go and vote, of course, with low turnout, it looks like STRAZHA has like 10%. They don't have to. It's huge still, and it's not real numbers of their followers. It really depends on the turnout.
Yeah. So yeah, I just want to say about social media and its effectiveness. I think it's very effective. Now, of course, so social media is a very big marketing tool that companies invest a lot of money in. That's why these companies have tens of billions of dollars in revenue, Facebook. Now the thing is, it is really difficult to measure the link between a person seeing your posts and then this person going to vote for your party, because it's a secret vote. It's just very difficult. But still you can see that it has an effect, and it has a very big effect. Now what's very important here is that misinformation does not always aim to make you vote for the party that's doing the misinformation. So there are two strategies. You either want to radicalize people and bring them into your inner core of followers, and then they'll be very loyal to you, and not only will they vote for you, but they'll spread your propaganda, which is, they'll spread it to their friends and family. The second thing is, you want to dissuade normal people from voting. So, let's say you have a fairly normal, psychologically stable person, let's say, and that person, wants to make a rational decision voting for a particular party, but you want to make that person think that you know, all politicians are bad, that, you know, you want to make him believe in conspiracies, or at the very least you want to confuse him so much that he's paralyzed with inaction. And that's the second strategy. And by the way, this is something you see in the interference in the United States in 2016, is that, for example, you have these, they make these pages for black people, where they basically post inspiring quotes, or, you know, stuff that's supposed to inspire black people, and you know, make them proud of themselves and whatever. And then the same page, when it comes to election time, is trying to make these people believe that all politicians are racist and that they shouldn't vote for anyone. So even though, you know, black people have a much higher tendency to vote for the Democrats, and the Russians preferred Trump in that election, so they wanted to dissuade the, you know, one of the most loyal electorates of the Democrats. They wanted to dissuade them from voting, because they knew that they, you know, the Russians were aware that they couldn't make them vote for Trump. There was no way, but at least they can make them not vote for Hillary.
They actually tried. Trump had really close people to him who were black.
Yeah.
I forgot their names, but he met a couple of pastors there, you know.
Yeah, you know, some minorities do vote for Republicans in the USA, but you know, right now the Cubans in Florida, for example. But you know, the one group that almost never votes for the Republicans are black people, and especially black women have a really, possibly the strongest tendency to vote Democrat.
But you're right to say that, because I think it's been shown psychologically, social media usually is being used as a tool, or as a way to confirm your own beliefs. So, for example, I don't think that social media will succeed in convincing someone to change completely what he or she thinks. So, in other words, we will not get a new voter by means of social media. You will just strengthen the belief in your own voters. But the thing is true that, and this is why the extremists, we were discussing that this morning too, but what extremist parties are always betting on is the low turnouts, because the lower the turnouts, the bigger their results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's true that creating confusion, creating despair, or whatever, that demotivates certain segments of society to go and vote. This is the most efficacious and vicious effect that social media can have, you know, and this can work maybe to some extent, yes.
Yeah, that's actually, it depends on the demographic. So the demographics who are inclined to vote for your opponent, you want to dissuade them from voting, because it's unlikely that you'll make them vote for you. You know, about the first thing you said, whether it's possible to get more voters from social media, so I'm not exactly sure, but you know, and it's really difficult to research this. But I think that it is possible, and the way I think this could happen is you lure in people with moderate content, you know, content which is not so radical. So that's why these funny pages are very effective, because you lure in people who just want to read funny posts, right?
Yes.
And then what happens is you show this propaganda once in a while. And it's not the propaganda itself that affects people, but it's the comment section.
Yeah.
Because when people see the comment section, they start to think that there is a consensus about these things. So when they see many people saying the same thing, they start to
think the same.
Yeah, so yeah, you know, because people are conformists mostly.
We are.
Yeah. Yeah, we are conformists.
Psychologically, we are conformists.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, so that way you make it seem that this is something that many people believe, and that makes more people believe it. But that is, you know, that is a trick, because the people in the comment section are fake. Some of them are just joining, you know, some of them are just brainwashed, but you know, the really radical ones are fake. That's the point.
Yeah.
So that way you can radicalize someone, but it's a very careful psychological trick. You really need to make that person angry. That's and you do need to make him seem like there is this movement of angry people that he should join.
Yeah.
So that could work. And last thing I want to say about social media is that social media has been probably the most effective thing for STRAZHA to gain more followers, gain more visitors, and gain more donations. Like for example, so I've been on TV many times, and even when I'm on, let's say, you know, for example, the one time that we got a lot of visits to the website after it was on Nova. It was a Sunday afternoon where many people actually watched TV during that time, and so it was basically a report, like a feature about our organization. And even though we got so many visits that broke the website, there were few donations. So even though people got interested on TV, they got interested in us, they weren't like very into the project. You know, that they didn't want to become like really active and participate with a donation, or they didn't join the page.
Not only that, people don't really like to pay for stuff.
Yeah, but I'm saying this because when we've posted something, let's say we've posted like analyses or different features we've announced, then we've got much more donations. You know, and I'm talking about a post which was viewed by maybe a few thousand people, and then we've got much more donations than when we've been on TV, where you have hundreds of thousands of viewers. That's what I mean. The TV.
That's interesting.
Yeah, even though TV is like.
It's a trend in the last couple of years. Basically, people either don't use TVs or use them with the internet, or just put them in the background and don't listen to it.
Yeah. So
You actually have engagement on
true.
social media.
So the thing
not
about
on
TV is that there is a lot of prestige on being shown on TV. That gives you a sort of legitimacy, like you're something that has been on TV, so it's not like something unknown to people. But then, when people see the TV has a sort of authority, and you don't trust that authority. You know, that's how people react to it. If something's on TV, then you think that it's not like grassroots. It's like when you see something on TV, you think, oh, they don't need donations, they're probably very big, you know, whatever. While on Facebook, you do have this grassroots feeling about everything, because you see actual people commenting everywhere. And I think that's the main factor which makes social media so effective, is that you have, so this is called social proof. You have other people, let's say, being donors or publicly expressing admiration for your project. And when other people see these people, you know, they become infected by this emotion, and they are likely to become fans as well. And that's basically why social media is so effective. That's what I mean. It's much more likely to get people to really like you on social media. While on TV, it's likely to get people to know who you are, but not to like you. And that's the main difference.
Yeah, interrupting because at some point we have to finish.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. It's been 2 hours, so we can go.
Yes. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. You can hit the snap best.